Welcome to Season 4 of UX Banter, your portal to insightful conversations with design illuminaries. We are back with even more engaging discussions with design leaders, delving into their experiences and inspirations. Get ready for fresh insights as we explore the latest trends and challenges in the industry. With me, your host, Dushyant Kanungo.
This podcast is presented by Galaxy UX Studio and powered by Galaxy Weblinks, an Inc. 5000 organization.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of the show. So, our guest today is an accomplished design leader with a robust background in product and experience design. He has led diverse teams and projects, contributing significantly to innovative user experiences. With expertise spanning various design disciplines and tools, he constantly demonstrates the ability to create compelling user centered designs. We are thrilled to have him share his insights and journey with us today. Please welcome Head of Design at Cortex, Zac Halbert.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So, welcome to the show once again, Zac. And it's quite late for you, and I would imagine that this must have required quite an effort. So, how the journey has been like? I mean, you have been leading teams, whether they're small or large, at the starting of their businesses to the, you ran your own practice as well. So, how the journey was like over the years?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. So I've spent most of my career at more early stage companies, but I guess I really got my start kind of in the late 90s, getting really excited about design and the web and all of that. And that was, I was just a teenager then, but it was really exciting to me, and I couldn't quite decide what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to make things for people, websites, tools, that kind of thing. And so I've been able to work across a lot of different industries and a lot of different companies. That's one thing I love about design, is just the ability to kind of go anywhere and take the toolkit with you. And so, I've spent most of my time in early stage startups, like I said, but I've also done a lot of consulting and freelance design. I also co-founded a company with a fellow designer, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, even though it was fun. And and so now I've been, for the last probably I'd say like 10 years or so, been joining early stage companies and kind of building the team up from there. I've been at Cortex for now just a couple months. So really just company's been around for 5 years, but I'm just getting started kind of building design there.
So, in the journey of building a team and making sure that all the parts come together and run smoothly, what do you think are the biggest challenges for anybody who is looking for, say, a shift in role or getting a promotion and then going into that particular, side of the business? It is very different. I mean, understandably
Yeah.
that you are doing the design part and now you have this additional responsibility that you're managing.
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge that I personally have run into, and that I think I've, just from talking to other designers, other peers, people ahead of me, behind me, is just the shift from sort of focusing solely on design to kind of realizing that design is a part of a larger kind of organization, right? I think when I was starting out, I went through design school, more like graphic design, but I definitely started out my career with this image that, design was extremely important, of course, because like I'm learning from designers and my focus is all on design. And the more I sort of like, grow in my career, the more I realize it's an important part of a company, but it's not the most important part, right? And so learning to speak the language of business and, just build alliances with other departments. A lot of that stuff is really kind of generally applicable skills that don't really pertain to design. So I think for me, when I was starting out, I thought, I've got to be the best at UI, the best at visual design, the best at all these things in order to grow my career. That was true up to a certain point, but now, like leading like a design organization, like UI skills, the ability to design an icon set, it just doesn't really figure in anymore as much as, managing conflict and, building alliances with other departments.
So it takes a completely different type of skill set for anybody to walk on those path and journey. I mean,
Yeah.
speaking of journeys, you have been traveling around and you lived at various places on the West Coast.
Yeah.
How much difference that you see that was there maybe in California to you are in Portland right now? Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think most of my experience is pretty well centered on like kind of the West Coast tech. I have lived in California for the majority of my life, and I was in the Bay Area for about 10 years before moving up to Portland about 4 years ago. And I will say that since I've been in Portland, I've been working remotely. I do think the vibe is pretty similar. I tend to encounter more I think cultural differences when I'm working with people on in like other geographic areas, like the East Coast or Europe or wherever. So it's I would say that like it seems to me that like things have become a lot more homogenized in terms of culture, where we, have, I think this is, thanks to, things like such as what you're doing, podcasts, educational resources, it does seem a lot more democratized where I can work with any development team, no matter where they live, and pretty much we're all on the same page from the start. Of course, there's like little differences here and there, but they're really surface level. And I think personally, I think that's a fantastic thing. And like most of the most talented people I've worked with have been from places that you wouldn't typically expect.
That's true. And I think one of the things that I personally learned is that you have to trust people and people are going to surprise you.
Oh
And
yeah.
that way of building leadership has been the mantra for me when
Mm,
dealing with challenges or growing the team. So that, the user advocacy, making sure that whatever you are producing is in line with those cross-functional team culture that you are handling. So do you
yeah.
feel that there are parts where it is still becomes a bit harder to find that seat at the table scenario? I mean, we do
Mm,
understand that designers again are restricted by the budget and other parts of how they are actually dealing with the business, but uh, cross-functional communication when you are actually not actively participating in a project as a leader, you are just saying, here are my five people who are going to be working on it. How much
yeah.
difficulties or how things can go wrong in that aspect?
So we're talking about cultural differences. Honestly, I think the biggest cultural difference I've seen is around which sort of function of the software company kind of runs the show. I've been at very technical companies where it's really like engineering running the show. I've been in more product focused companies or more sales focused companies. And so I think that has a much bigger impact on kind of design's ability to make an impact, and that trickles down to this sort of design leader to design IC. So one thing that I really enjoyed in my career is kind of joining like earlier stage companies where there isn't such a large design org in place. So I've never really been in a position where I'm not actively involved in kind of the individual contribution. So even if it's a team member who's like working on something where I'm not touching it at all, we're still doing regular design critiques and things like that. And so I think there is definitely a shift for me when I first made that transition. There's sort of a control issue there. I think a lot of designers, maybe I'm projecting here, but a lot of designers are sort of control freaks a little bit, wanting to kind of make sure everything's aligned and pixel perfect and all of that. And so going hands off and letting someone else work on and make decisions, I think that is definitely like culturally difficult for a lot of people. I won't say that that I've figured it out, but I definitely also I can remember when I've had, bosses or stakeholders who have tried to dictate exactly what I should do and how much I hated that. So I try not to be that person for other designers I'm working with. Um, I'm sure with limited success, but it's a goal.
But I don't think you are projecting. I think one of the things that even I tell my designers is that if there is a feedback about the design or any critique about the design, it is about the design. They are not criticizing you. So don't get
Yeah.
offended, don't take it personally, and
Yeah.
things will be fine. And I think that is where everybody feels, well, all the designers worldwide, that is going to be the same scenario. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think you make a perfect point that, letting them do the thing, having that trust factor built in is something that we all need to work through. All right. So with
Yeah.
that, I'm going to the fun parts of my diary, and we are going to go
Great.
through some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right. So, what is your go-to food? What is like a 3 o'clock, 3 in the morning?
Sushi. Oh,
Sushi.
well, it's not available at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I love sushi, and I have a spot right by my house with a conveyor belt and everything. And when I can't think of anything else, I just go sit down at the conveyor belt.
You don't eat sushi, is it?
Yeah.
All right. So, do you cook?
I am a capable cook. I don't enjoy it very much, but I can.
So, window or aisle seat?
Window seat,
Nice.
always.
Uh, Sunrises or sunsets?
Sunset. I'm dead in the morning.
Well, and you are on the West Coast, so of course, the most beautiful sunsets in the world that you can actually find. Some of them, they're definitely on the
Yeah.
west side, so that is pretty obvious.
Yeah. I do miss sunset on the beach when from living in California.
They are beautiful, aren't they? So, if you had a superpower for one day, what would it be?
Flying for sure. No doubt.
So, are you a books or movies person?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, I know this is rapid fire. I go through phases. So sometimes, so I haven't been watching movies lately. Been doing more books. But then I'll go through other phases where I'm like, I don't have the attention to read, and so I'm all about movies.
Any book that you would recommend?
Oh, that's a hard question. I am bad at coming up with recommendations on the spot like this. Uh, I really like sci-fi books, so I will pick one that I like. I really like nerdy, like sciencey space books. So like Red Mars comes to mind. I think partially because I'm looking at the OSX background and it's like it looks like a deserty landscape, and so that's the connection my brain just made. I wouldn't say it's my favorite book, but I definitely recommend people like it if they are into nerdy space stuff.
And any UX book or design book?
So recently, org design for for org design for design orgs, I thought was really great. You know, there's the classics like design of everyday things. I think at this point they're a little bit, dated, but also really, really timeless in some ways. I find myself
Yes.
repeating principles all the time. So
Yeah, I think it was written in an era and things still are relevant, which people
yeah,
mostly, tend to neglect. But I think it covers the basics, the fundamentals are
yeah,
clear. And I think it works in more than one way, if you look at it. All right.
yeah, totally.
And your favorite holiday destination?
Japan.
How many times have you been there?
I've been 3 times. I would like to go more.
Nice. Anything
Yeah.
special about it?
So I think of Japan as sort of like it's really fun to go for designers because the level of detail in really small aspects of things that you don't typically notice. I would find myself walking up a subway platform and just looking at the detail of the person who set the stones in the in the staircase, and it's just like unlike anything that I had really seen in any other place. It just felt like there's a level of care and attention and polish that I think really resonates with a lot of designers. And so it helps that I love Japanese food, of course, but just the architecture and just level of detail. It just for me it felt like I was among kindred spirits.
Wow. And I think one of the things which is the service design that is done in Japan,
Mm,
it's one of the most
absolutely.
fascinating parts of the world that you
Yeah.
pretty fine there. And next comes, I think, South Korea. They are two places where, if you look at
Mm,
any level of service design that they have come up with, and then of course
yeah,
the Disneyland of the world, which is Dubai. Uh, you go there, and
yeah,
it's ridiculous how they have actually managed to pull it off. One thing and the other, but definitely Japan is a solid recommendation. All right.
yeah,
So with that, coming back to the discussion that we were having, we were talking about that the multiple skill sets, not just on the leadership front, but the design side. How much technical knowledge or upgradation is required for the individual contributors nowadays when they are
yeah.
working with, say, new AI-based libraries or any big data library, which is on the disposal of or the data visualization libraries. How much do you
Oh,
think
yeah.
that knowledge is required for individual contributors?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I think about this is, you know, design is one of these disciplines where there's not really a minimum level of knowledge, right? The right level is as much as you have time to acquire. That's my belief anyway. Like I've been someone who has learned to code. I've learned like 3D stuff. I've learned like basically anything that interests me, I have learned. And in my opinion, all of that has made me a better designer, right? There has never been a single piece of information where I'm like, learning that made me worse at my job. And so, what I don't think designers should do is force themselves to learn something that they're not passionate about. So, like, sometimes I'll hear a designer who's like, I know I should learn to code, and and they like put it off because like they don't actually want to do that. I think it's a terrible use of time because design is such a broad skill set that I think it's whether you are drawn to more of a generalist skill set or you really like specializing in a certain niche, there's a place for you. So for me, I am really drawn to this like early stage startup generalist skill set. And so for me, like learning as much as possible about a lot of different things is really useful. But I would also, have a really hard time working in an environment where I was required to be the best in the world in this one sub discipline of design. I would be miserable. I wouldn't be very good at it, things like that. So from a technical perspective, I do think there's like a certain level of base knowledge that every designer should have. I'm contradicting myself because I just said there's no minimum. I guess there is a minimum. I tend to think of it like this: like if you are, an architect or you're designing cars, right? And you have like zero idea how like engines work or the physics of materials, like is wood more stable than, metal, things like that. You need some base level of knowing the materials you're working with to be able to design effectively.
And what about the other side of the table, talking about
Yeah.
business and having that business analysis skills and how to be able to upsell what you are actually producing? Do you think that there has to be some level of minimum understanding or a maximum understanding or detailing is required? I mean, coding, somebody would say that
Yeah.
I want to, but I, can't get my head around. And then there is an
Yeah.
alternate which goes into the zone. So as a leader, I mean, business analysis is one of the core skills that comes to mind because many a times
Yeah.
people fail to get the whole picture. The requirements are not, getting beyond to that point, or it is
Yeah.
not well documented. So you have to make things up and then say, this is how it is going to complete the
Yeah.
circle.
Yeah. So, again, I think there's no reason not to learn these things, but I think it depends a lot on your goals. So if you're at a larger company and you really want to specialize in design systems, I don't think it's necessary that you be able to, like write a really good business case for why we should bring a new product to market, that like sort of product manager skill set. But if you are like a design leader working alongside other, product and the working with the founders, then like you absolutely need that skill set because you can't be the voice of design and the voice of the user in this conversation if you don't even have the same language, right, that everyone else is speaking. And so I think of it like, at least for me, being the sort of typically the most senior designer in a company, everyone else at the table has their own specialty. They don't really care about how well I know how to design an icon, right? It's like, how well can I suggest design, principles or guide us from a design perspective in a way that unlocks kind of business value, because that's why we're all there, right? It's not a hobby. We're all kind of trying to build a business. And so I do think designers have a unique perspective, but the requirement is you're able to speak the language that other people are speaking. So yeah, I guess in short, I do think it's important if you are interested in that kind of design leadership or kind of director level responsibility.
Cool. And with that, I think the way that, the number of years of experience you have, you also do mentorship at ADP List. Any experiences from that
Yeah.
there or common questions that you answer?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been doing ADP List for really since it started. And I've been doing mentorship with just other designers. I really enjoy mentorship. I guess common questions that I run into, most of the questions that I get, I'll say, are related to interpersonal dynamics, right? It's very rarely related to, the hard skills of design. But I think the one that like commonly comes up, I think, especially with like mid-level designers, is around sort of designers trying to find their place in the company. And so this is something that is where it comes up a lot is they are being asked to do something and the designer wants to do it a certain way, but they don't feel like they have the resources or the time to be able to do it. So, common example here is like, I was given a job, a task, whatever, and, it's like a 2-week project to do the research and to do all the things. And, my boss gave me 2 days, and like, how do I do that? Like, am I doing it wrong? And so almost all the questions I get are kind of some flavor of that, with I guess a few exceptions. But yeah, the way that I typically advise people on this, I think, is really related to just like showing your value. So I think designers talk a lot about this idea of like fighting for a seat at the table and kind of like advocating. And I do think all those things are important. But I also think that there are certain disciplines that don't have to fight for a seat at the table, right? Like I've never heard like engineers talking about needing to fight for their place at the table, right? Because they're essential. And I think design has the ability to become essential, but I think oftentimes designers come at it with this really sort of rosy picture of how design should work. And they're like, how can I force other people to see it my way and like slow everything down so that we can achieve the highest level of quality? I think there has to be like a compromise there, right? Designers are perfectionists generally. And, like for me to feel comfortable releasing something, I want the quality to be here. The business maybe wants it to be here. And so, maybe finding some middle ground there where we can like kind of work together. That's typically how I think about that type of question. At least that's most of the questions I get on ADP List.
One point that you made very early on in the discussion, that if you go to a design school, they teach you this is like the most important thing. And I think that mindset hurts a lot and takes a lot of time for people to actually cross verify and understand that. I think what you just said about the common question that comes in, just being able to provide the solution, build an empathy of the user set that you are actually targeting for, the time frame actually
Yeah.
can be reduced. But I think fundamentally, from the point of having a theoretical practice of design versus the real world practice of design, there are
Yeah.
big differentiators. And I think that is where the biggest problems that happens with people who are just starting out. They feel what they are actually producing or what they are saying should be weighted in gold and just be executed
Yeah.
like that. But then
Yeah.
now with AI, the things are changing because the designers are not sure how much AI can do. And that is
Yeah.
where they have to understand that how to build into the process that they are following, or maybe even on the
Yeah.
feature side, they said that we have created this feature and well, the developers saying that, okay, go on and design. We don't worry about how much effort it will require. We should be able to do it. But the designers are not sure about whether or not to propose a solution on those lines. So I think there is bit of an
Mm,
overlap that has to be taught from the beginning, I think, in the education system itself. But then there are
yeah.
people like you who are there to actually educate and do the mentoring. So I would just like to add, anybody who would like to get a session or talk to Zach in person, they can definitely go to adplist.org, and Zac
Yeah.
Halbert, you can search his name. The URL is in the description for you to see and connect with him and get his advice if you find the topic today interesting and want to know or talk more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to chat.
Cool. So I think with this, any advice that you would like more to give to people who are starting out? I think we have covered the umbrella, but if you think that we have
Yeah.
missed something out.
I think general advice, you brought up the AI topic, and I think just to address that, because I suspect that there's a lot of anxiety around it. The way I think it's helpful to be really almost reductionist about what a designer does, and thinking about AI as a tool, right? I've been doing design for a long time, and it used to be really hard to do the stuff now that we're able to do really quickly with design systems. It used to be that every single UI element was handcrafted, but now we get these like great libraries of stuff. And I remember experiencing anxiety around that when it first started coming out. And I think the key detail here is that designers are the voice of what users actually want, right? Other members of the business are thinking about things like, is this feasible to build? Or, is there a market? Can we make enough money? But designers are really hyper focused on just being able to identify what users want. And I think that's the skill set to focus on, because I think, to the extent that AI is going to take over people's jobs, I think that's probably going to be later. I think I would be more worried about focusing on design systems and UI kits and things like that, just because, there's a lot more standardization there. But moving up to sort of like ladder of abstraction and thinking about, how do I marry solutions to problems that people have or things that help them feel empowered and good and all of that. That's a really hard thing to. We see this with LLMs, right? They can be honestly really impressive sometimes, but they're not like it's rare to see them with just really truly unique original insight. So I think focusing on that is important, and just learning as much as possible is probably the best thing to do in 2024 if you're just starting out.
Great. And at Cortex, I hear that you are going to be or starting a process where you are looking to expand your team. So anybody who is interested can connect with
Yep.
you over LinkedIn to explore the opportunities.
Yep, I think that's the best place. As roles become available, I'll be posting them there. It's a really interesting company. Great if you're a designer who likes technical challenges like I do. It's a very dense, kind of heavy, sort of like information dense kind of UI, which personally I find really fun. So I'd say if that resonates with you at all, then definitely follow me and stay tuned.
Cool. So thank you so much for joining us today, Zach. And it was a fun banter that we had. And I hope that a lot of our listeners are going to get the same feeling of how to grow in the career. If they are currently an individual contributor, they want to move up to the head of design positions, they can definitely take inspiration from this conversation and learn a lot. So thank you once again, Zach. And I hope that you enjoyed much as we did.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And with another episode, we will come back to you guys pretty soon. So stay tuned, like, follow, and subscribe. I never said that before, but do that, and we will continue this sort of conversations in the future. So thank you once again.